The world often measures a man by the strength of his hands or the depth of his pockets. But in the eyes of the heavens, the true measure is found in the stillness of his soul when the world begins to crumble. Meet a man whose life was a quiet prayer. He was not a king, nor a scholar whose name echoed in the halls of power. He was a humble believer who found his wealth in the coolness of the far breeze. His security was in the conviction that his rizq, his sustenance, was already written by the one who created the stars. He walked with a bowed head, not out of defeat, but out of a deep, silent contentment with the Qadar of his Lord. But peace, in this earthly life, is often the preamble to a storm. It happened in the blink of an eye, the sudden disruption that no calculation could foresee. The shop he had built with decades of sweat was gone, swallowed by a fire or perhaps a debt he didn't deserve. Poverty, a cold and relentless shadow, moved into his home. Then came the betrayal, the sharp sting of a brother he had trusted, a friend who looked him in the eye and chose a few coins over a lifetime of loyalty. His dignity, once his most prized possession, was stripped away in the marketplace of gossip and judgment. And then came the ultimate silence, the vacant chair at the table, the loss of a loved one whose voice was the only melody that could soothe his tired heart. Everything he knew was removed. Delay became his constant companion. He prayed for relief, for a sign, for a door to open, but the sky remained silent. This was his first emotional collapse, the moment when the why begins to scream louder than the how. In the darkness of his room, he felt the crushing weight of the divine decree, the Al-Qadr wa Al-Qadar. He questioned if he had failed. He wondered if this was a punishment, a sign that he was no longer seen by the one he worshipped. But listen closely to the whispers of the Surah Al-Qadr. We are told of a night better than 1,000 months, a night where the annual destiny of every person is determined. We celebrate it with candles and joy, but we often forget that the decree, the Qadar, contains both the ease and the hardship. We must understand a truth that the heart often rejects in its grief: tests are not punishments. To the believer, a calamity is not a closed door, but a test of faith, a refinement of the spirit. Why does Allah test those He loves? It is because the gold must pass through the fire to be purified. He removes not to deprive, but to protect. He delays not to deny, but to prepare. Think of the child whose toy is taken away to prevent him from running into the street. To the child, it is a loss of immense proportions. To the father, it is an act of mercy. In our limited sight, we see the removal. We do not see the protection it provides from a harm we cannot yet comprehend. Everything that befalls us is inscribed in the Book of Decrees, before we even come into existence. Every loss is a thread in a tapestry so vast that we can only see the knots on the back. The man now sits in the silence of the last third of the night. He does not scream. He does not demand. He simply turns to Allah in the wordless language of tears. He remembers the promise, peace. This until the rise of dawn. But for him, the dawn feels a lifetime away. He is caught in the night of measures, waiting to see what has been written for him in the next year of his life. He is a man suspended between the pain of what was taken and the mystery of what is yet to come. He is learning that to believe in Qadar is to trust the hand that writes, even when the ink is made of tears. How long can a heart wait in the dark? And what happens when the one thing you have left, your faith, is the only thing being tested? How long can a heart sustain itself on a promise when the eyes see only ruins? Months have bled into years, and the humble believer remains in the shadows of his trial. The initial shock of loss has been replaced by a much heavier burden, the silence of the heavens. He has raised his hands in supplication, his dua, until his arms ached and his voice broke, yet the doors remain bolted. He watches the moon wax and wane, marking the passage of time that seems to bring everyone's harvest but his own. He walks through the marketplace and sees the brother who betrayed him flourishing in wealth. He passes the homes of those who never bow their heads in prayer, yet their tables are overflowing and their children are healthy. In the quiet corners of his mind, a dangerous whisper begins to take root, the whisper of self-doubt. Is my faith not enough? He wonders. Has the ink dried on a decree of misery for me? He feels the crushing weight of loneliness, not just because he is poor, but because he feels invisible to the world and, in his darkest moments, forgotten by his Creator. But to believe in Al-Qadr, the divine destiny, is to understand that the measure and limit of all things is held by a hand more merciful than our own. He is learning that time, to Allah, is not the linear cage it is for us. We are told that on the night of power, the angels descend with the decrees concerning every matter. This is the taqdeer sanawi, the yearly fate where our sustenance, our births, and our deaths are sent down from the heaven to the earth. The believer prays for the script to change, for the hardship to lift. He feels despair when the sun rises and his pockets are still empty. He does not see the unseen work of destiny. He does not see the calamities that were averted because of a single tear he shed in the middle of the night. He does not see that his very persistence in dua is itself a gift, a sign that he is being pulled closer, refined by the very fire he asks to be extinguished. He chooses patience. Not the patience of the defeated, but sabr, a steadfastness that refuses to complain to anyone but Allah. He remembers the words, Rein any nous atteindra, endure de cek Dieu a prescrit pour nous, nothing will happen to us except what God has ordained for us. He begins to realize that Allah's silence is not absence. It is the silence of a gardener watching the seed struggle beneath the soil. The growth is happening where the eye cannot reach. He is caught in the tension between hope and despair. He knows that a supplication can change destiny, that the indefinite fate can be replaced by another through the power of prayer. Yet he remains in the now, where the change hasn't come. He watches the gradual revelation of his own life, verse by painful verse, much like the Quran was revealed over 23 years. He is a man waiting for his own night of decree, searching for the peace that is promised until the rise of dawn. But the dawn has not yet broken. He sits on his prayer mat, the fabric worn thin by his knees. He is still poor. He is still alone. He is still waiting. His heart is a battlefield where the conviction of the preserved tablet meets the agony of human longing. He has chosen to trust the writer of his story, even while the current chapter feels like an endless winter. But as the shadows lengthen, the question remains, when the soul is pushed to the very edge of its capacity, will it shatter, or will it finally learn to fly? There is a depth of winter that no coat can warm, a coldness that settles in the marrow of a soul when it believes it has finally been forgotten. Our believer has reached the floor of his existence. Materially, he is a ghost in his own life. The sustenance he once took for granted, the rizq that God lavishes or stints according to his will, has been pulled back. He stands in the wreckage of a life where every pillar has collapsed. It is not just the poverty or the betrayal anymore. It is the silence. He looks at his empty hands and feels the weight of a decree he cannot understand, the Al-Qadr wa Al-Qadr that seems to have written a story of absolute ruin. This is the peak of the trial. This is the moment where the whispers of the shaitan become a roar, mocking his years of prostration. Why you? The voice asks. Why the one who prayed, while the unjust flourish? He feels a terrifying temptation to let go of the rope of faith. To believe that he is a victim of a blind, mechanical fate rather than a divine, calculated measure. He feels the tremendous punishment of a heart that feels sealed away from the light. But in the Islamic tradition, we are taught that nothing can befall us except what God has prescribed. Even this agony, this affliction or musibah, is a concept held within the hands of Qadar. It is easy to believe when the table is full. But the soul's true metal is only revealed when it is stripped of every earthly crutch. He begins his night of measures, a personal Laylat al-Qadr within his own spirit. He falls into a prostration that is different from all others. It is a night of tears and honest dua, where he stops asking for the world to change and starts asking for his heart to endure. He remembers that everything, every leaf that falls, every seed in the darkness of the earth, is known to him and consigned in the Book of Decrees. He realizes that if God is the creator of all actions, then he is also the creator of this very moment of pain. In the absolute darkness, he performs the most difficult act a human can endure, he lets go of control. He accepts that his limited human mind cannot grasp the secret of Allah, the hidden wisdom of why some are raised and others are lowered. He surrenders to the four pillars of the decree, the knowledge that Allah saw this moment before time began, the writing that inscribed it in the preserved tablet, the will that allowed it to pass, and the creation that brought this trial into his reality. He finally understands the divine paradox. When Allah wants to raise a soul to a station it cannot reach by deeds alone, he empties its hands first. He clears the clutter of the world so that there is nothing left for the heart to hold on to but the divine. This is a sincerity born from pain, a purity that cannot be manufactured in times of ease. He is no longer the genuine creator of his own path. He is a servant content with the writer of his story. The lamp flickers one last time and goes out. The room is in total darkness, save for a faint, almost imperceptible gray softening the edge of the window. The miracle has not happened. The wealth has not returned. The betrayal has not been undone. There is no thunderous sign from the heavens. There is only a quiet, heavy hope that has taken root in the soil of his surrender. He sits in the stillness, a man who has lost the world but found the peace that the angels bring when they descend with the decrees of the year. He is no longer waiting for the trial to end. He is waiting for the dawn to break, trusting that the night of power within him is better than 1,000 months of a life lived in a comfortable, forgetful slumber. The sky remains dark. The clock continues its rhythmic tick. But for the first time in years, the believer is not afraid of the silence. The greatest miracle of faith is not a mountain that moves at a command, but a heart that remains still while the earth beneath it shakes. In the long, cold winter of his trial, the believer has discovered a secret that the world cannot teach. Inner peace is the first sign of an answered prayer. He no longer raises his hands only to ask for the removal of his burden. He now asks for the strength of the back that carries it. He has moved beyond the why and stepped into the realm of Isen, the excellence of worshipping the Creator as if he sees him, even when the world remains veiled in shadow. He has come to understand that healing begins inside before the external life changes, for the heavens have promised that Allah does not change the condition of a people until they first change what is within themselves. Help from the divine does not always arrive with a thunderclap or a sudden windfall. More often, it begins with the smallest, most unexpected changes in the wind. One morning, while his pockets were still empty and his old life still in ruins, he encountered a traveler at the edge of the village, a man whose clothes were more tattered than his own and whose eyes held a deeper hunger. In his previous life of comfort, he might have walked past with a hurried coin. But his hardship had refined his soul, stripping away the armor of pride. He shared his last piece of bread and a cup of water, seeking no recognition, for he had learned that whatever good befalls him is a gift from the generous Al-Karim. This simple act of kindness, born of a heart that had been broken and then mended by Sabr, was his taqdeer yami, the daily fate written with the ink of mercy. He did not know that this stranger was an unlikely source of relief, a man who had once worked for the very merchant who had betrayed him. The traveler spoke not of gold, but of an unexpected opportunity, a small, honest labor in a nearby town that needed a man of integrity. A man who could be trusted with the keys to a gate because he had already proven he could be trusted with the silence of his own grief. To the world, this was a coincidence. To the believer, it was the unseen work of destiny. He began to see that his years of struggle were not a delay, but a preparation. Growth is found in character, not in comfort, and his trial had been the furnace that transformed his clay into steel. He realized that while his taqdeer al-umri, his lifespan and his sustenance, was written before he drew his first breath, his persistence in dua and his refinement of character allowed for an indefinite destiny to be replaced by a decree of ease by the will of the Almighty. Allah sends help quietly, moving through the hands of a stranger and the timing of a conversation, proving that he is the most knowing about the precise moment a soul is ready to receive. The pillars of Qadar, omniscience, the writing, the will, and the creation, were no longer abstract concepts to him. They were the heartbeat of his daily life. He recognized the first sign of relief not in a full table, but in the absence of fear. He looked at his worn hands and saw not the evidence of poverty, but the tools of a new beginning. The rizq he thought was lost had never been gone. It was merely being held in the Lahu el-Mahfuz, the preserved tablet, until his heart was vast enough to hold it without the danger of arrogance. The sky is no longer a heavy shroud of unanswered questions. It is a canvas of gentle hope. The taqdeer sanawi, the yearly decree, is clearly shifting, as if the peace of the night of power has finally reached the shores of his morning. He stands at the threshold of a new chapter, realizing that every loss was a removal for his protection and every delay was a gathering of strength. The dawn is not just coming. It is already here, reflected in the stillness of a believer who finally knows that his Lord has never, for a single moment, forgotten him. The sun does not merely rise. It arrives with a purpose, reclaiming the world from a night that felt eternal. For the believer, this is the final verse of a long, painful chapter. He stands today in the light of a reality he could not have imagined when he sat in the ruins of his old life. Stability has returned, but it is not the fragile comfort he once knew. This success is anchored in a heart that has been hollowed out and refilled by the generous Al-Karim. He looks back now at the smoke of his burnt shop and the sharp sting of the betrayal that once felt like a tremendous punishment. In the clarity of the morning, the why finally makes sense. He realizes that the measure and limit, the Qadr, of his life was being calibrated by a wisdom far greater than his own. The fire that took his wealth was not a cruelty. It was a divine intervention. He sees now that his old success was leading him toward a pride that would have consumed his soul. Allah stinted his rizq to save his spirit. He was removed from a path of arrogance and placed into a furnace of refinement so that he could finally be trusted with true abundance. Every delay was a mercy. Every closed door was a protection from a harm he could not comprehend. If he had achieved success on his own timeline, he would have credited his own hands. But because it came only after he had let go of everything, he knows that whatever good befalls him is from Allah. He understands the full circle. The betrayal of a friend taught him to rely only on the trustworthy spirit. The hunger of the lean years made him a man who now feeds the hungry with a sincerity that cannot be faked. His life is better than he imagined, not because he has more, but because he is more. We often think of Al-Qadr, the divine decree, as a fixed, cold script. But it is a living night of power that repeats in every soul. We must realize that Allah never delays without wisdom, and He never takes except to give something better. Patience, sabr, is not just the ability to wait. It is the unwavering conviction that the Book of Decrees is written by the one who is our protector. We are only responsible for the striving, while the particulars of the judgment belong to the one who knows what is in the land and the sea. The moral of this journey is written in the stars and in the scars. Patience always pays, but it pays on a divine timeline, not a human one. When you feel forgotten in the dark, remember that the night of decree is better than 1,000 months of ease. It is the night when the peace descends and remains until the rise of dawn. Your dawn is not a matter of if, but when. O Allah, I seek refuge in your pleasure from your wrath, and in your forgiveness from your punishment. I cannot praise you enough. You are as you have praised yourself. O Writer of Destinies, make me content with what you have decreed, and grant me a heart that sees your mercy even in the midst of your tests. Indeed, you are the most knowing, the most wise.